All right, so now moving on in the case study, we're on to section 5, preparing pivot tables. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about how the different various ways you can use and create pivot tables. I really just want to show you in this quick video the fastest way to create a pivot table that you can use to create adjustable charts, interactive charts that you can change with a pivot chart. Now here in the activity, we start off wanting to set up our pivot table and it'll end up looking something like this. But let's go right into the data and take a look. So remember, you want to open up the BBHS Infection 2013 worksheet for all facilities. You can see it in the title here. And that'll give you the data that we had prepared for all the facilities. And you know what? I don't like how it's not letting me scroll, so I'm going to actually freeze panes so that I can actually scroll up and down. There we go. So you can see over here on the left in column A, we have our abbreviations for each of those facilities and all their data. Now, there's several ways that you can create a pivot chart. You navigate to the Insert tab, and generally what a lot of folks do is they create pivot tables first. What that entails is selecting some area of data and then saying Insert Pivot Table. So for example, you might highlight all the data we have in this table, insert a pivot table, and then you can either place it in an area of your existing worksheet or put it on a new worksheet. I typically place it on a new worksheet. It just keeps the file cleaner. Hit OK, and there you have it. You'll see a new sheets popped up. We have our potential pivot spreadsheet, and then what this interface lets you do is click on certain variables and start to adjust it and manipulate the data in certain ways. We'll go into a little more detail about this with the charts. But the problem with this is you don't actually have a chart built off of this. Now that you've made the table, now you have to highlight the data, insert a chart, and you might click Pivot Chart here and then add something. Now that's all well and good, but I'm going to show you a quick shortcut to help you do this a little bit faster. Alright, so I'm going to delete that sheet that we made. An easier way, if you know that you want to use this data to actually do some analysis and create some charts right off the bat, rather than creating a new pivot spreadsheet first, you can do this quickly by highlighting all the data, clicking Insert, Pivot Table, and go directly to Pivot Chart. This will give you some options in the prompt. It confirms the range that you've highlighted, so the area you highlighted is already saying select table or range. You've already done that because you highlighted it before you click the button. And then it says choose where you want the pivot table and pivot chart to be placed. Again, I always select new worksheet. It just keeps things cleaner. And hit OK. Alright, great. So now what you have is your pivot table here on the left in the field that'll be updated as you use the field list menu over on the right, as well as your chart. So let's go back to the case study and take a look at our first question. Alright, so the team would like to begin by looking at a chart of the number of infections by facility. And here you can see we have a chart. It's a column chart where each of the facilities is here at the bottom, and it's showing their number of infections for each account. So how do we use this table to generate an analysis like this? Well, you have a couple fields here. The report filter field, which lets you filter out certain variables from any of these fields. A column labels field and a row labels field, which let you adjust what is showing where on the axis. And then a values field, which is adjustable, which lets you put some kind of data in there, for example, age, and it's set up here to sum all the ages of all the patients here, which isn't really that valuable. But you can adjust this by changing the settings of the field. So you might just say average instead of count or sum. And what's cool about this is you can use it pretty easily by clicking to select, and it'll automatically place these variables into the row labels field, and unclicking to remove it. You'll see the table over on the left adjusting as you do that in real time. Or dragging and dropping. So you can take the facility field and say, you know what, I want this to be filterable by the facility, and I want to be able to look at the different organisms across. So that, again, just as a sum. Let's do row labels and then drop the organisms into the sum column so it counts them all up. Okay, so here's an example. You're looking at all the organisms across all the facilities. Now, if I wanted to, I could go in here and filter out certain facilities. So I might be able to say, you know what, I only want to look at it at Arapahoe Valley, and it'll give you Arapahoe Valley. And then you can unclick that or click them all again, and it'll give you all of them. So there's a lot of options here, ways you can manipulate the data to view what you want to see, and different ways you can filter it. Now in this case, let me blank this out, and let's look at the first question. So we want to look at number of infections by facility. Now, first thing we want to do is break it down. The facility, each instance the facility appears in the table will be an instance of an infection. And then we want to look at that on the axis field across the different facilities. So there you have it. Pretty impressive. You know, just 2 clicks, 2 drag and drops, and you're looking at the number of infections across each of the facilities, just like in the case study. Now, you can do different adjustments here as well, but let's just walk through the case study and see what we're asked to do next. All right, next we were asked to create a bar chart or column chart that shows the number of infections by month with a trend line on it. Okay, so now we're getting a little more advanced. So let's go back to our data. So we want number of infections by month. Now let's assume that the lab collection date is our time period. Now you can kind of scratch your head before you do anything and say, should this go in the legends field? Should this go in the axis field? I don't know. The easiest thing I think there is to do is, rather than think it through, just drag and drop or click on it. I'm going to get rid of this facility filter because we're not worried about this by facility. Okay, and there you have it. We're looking at this over time. So count of infections, 1 or 2, over a time period from 1/24/2013 to 1/13/2014. Now, if you're looking at this, you may look at this and say, this is pretty hard to interpret. It's not really a consistent time frame on this axis. That's kind of an issue. You can actually go over, and this is a trick that you have to use for certain dates, and you can go over to the fields on the right click, and there's this group option if you highlight it. And you can group it by month. It's already actually set up to do so. And watch what happens when you hit OK here. All right, so now what it's doing is it's taking all those dates and just bucketing them by month so that you can look at this whole year's data in one fell swoop in 12 months. So great, so if we go back to our chart, looks very similar. Now there's one difference though, they've added this trend line here. How do they do that? It looks like they're saying that over the course of the year there's a slight trend upwards. There's this bump at the end of summer and fall here, and that's leading to an upward trend. How do you display that? Well, what you can do is click on the data, go to the Layout tab, and now there's a trend line drop down. You can click on that and select different types of trends. I'm not going to get into the detail of what type of trend line you should use in what case. In this case, they're just using a linear trend line, and we're going to add that. And there you have it. Now you've got an upward trend displayed by the trend line. It's showing up in the legend here. And now you can effectively have a discussion about this trend and maybe some of the seasonality with infections. All right, pretty cool how you can make all these adjustments pretty quickly and get to what you want to see. So now as the discussion goes on, it looks like they want to look at the number of infections by facility, by unit or room. Now this is where we start to get digging into the data a little more and using this tool to really try and look across the entire system and understand, okay, at what facilities are infections occurring the most, but also to the next level of detail, in what areas of these hospitals are we experiencing the most infections? So how do we display this in the pivot chart? Well, one thing, we can get rid of the dates. We're not worried about that anymore. So all you got to do is select the dates out of the axis field, drag and drop it out of there. Not a big deal. So now there's two things we want to look at. We're looking at, and if you go back here, we're looking at our unit or the room that the infections occurred in and the facility. This is kind of known as a grouped bar chart. So if we go back, we already have facility, so we can drag that down into the axis field. You know what, I'm going to get rid of this trend line too. We can drag that down into the axis field, and now we have our breakdown by facility. But we're adding this next level of detail, and it's with the unit or room. So you know what, I'm not even going to click on it. I'm going to drag and drop it to the legends field and see what happens. Oh, interesting. It gives each of the rooms its own category in the legend. But you know what, that's not all that easy to interpret or read. So let's try dragging it down here to the axis field. Aha, there we go. That looks a little more similar to our case study. So here you can see we show where the infections are occurring for each hospital, AVH being Arapahoe Valley, having floors 1, 3, and 4, and then also the count of infections that have occurred on each floor. Now, from looking at this, it looks like there's two big contributors, floor-wise, unit-wise, to our infections across the system. Number one is floor 1 at Arapahoe Valley Hospital. And the second biggest contributor is floor 3 West, or Unit 3 West, over at FHH, Foothills Hospital. All right. Looks pretty similar, right? Okay, so let's keep digging into this. And here we'll have to use a little filtering. It looks like in the case study they want to take a closer look at floor 1 at, I believe it's at Arapahoe Valley. So we're going to actually use some of the filters here and show you how that works. So we have all our different rooms. We only want to look at floor 1. So how do we get rid of all this data and just zoom in on floor 1? Well, you'll notice there's a couple ways to do this. You could add a filter as unit room over here and let yourself zoom out. Looks like it dragged it over there. The easiest and quickest way is to go directly to the drop down for that variable on your graph and click it. And now you'll see all the different floors or checkboxes. You can click the select all to unselect them all, and then only click on floor 1. There you have it. Now we've blanked out all the other floors. We're only looking at floor 1. But what does the case study ask us to do? It looks like we're trying to understand what surgeons have performed cases that end up having patients on that floor with infection. So how do we add this now into the chart, this breakdown? Well, we have our surgeon field here. All you got to do, drag, drop it into the axis field, and there you have it. I'll zoom this out a little bit so it's a little easier to read. And it looks like Dr. Holmes over here has contributed about 6. Here, let's add some data labels to that so we can see. Yeah, so R. Holmes has contributed 6 cases with infection. M. Banks has 4, J. Davis has 3. All right, so pretty valuable, pretty quick way to dig into the data. Okay, so I'm going to stop there with this video. I hope that this has helped you to see how you can use pivot tables to quickly take a spreadsheet of data and generate a bunch of different views of the analysis and how you break it down. Furthermore, to understand how you can dig deeper into data and start to filter it and add different stratifications using the axis field, the legends, and these report filters. Thanks.